This is the UB Football Podcast with Brad Ryder and Scott Wilson.
What's up? It's been a while. It's a UB Football Podcast with Brad Ryder along with Scott Wilson as we get set for another big MAC game, this time at UB Stadium. The Bulls taking on the Toledo Rockets. As I mentioned, it's been a while. I didn't play this past weekend, and we didn't do a podcast last week. And the last time we did a podcast, I felt so good, not just about UB and where the program was heading and beating the number 23 team in the country, but just football in general. My football life revolves around the UB Bulls and, as a fan, the Buffalo Bills. And I think I jinxed it when I told my mom how great football season was going, because there was a 3-0 team and a 3-1 team. And since then, I've watched 3 losses and sat through a week of no Bulls. And so I feel less pumped about the outcome for both of the teams that I root for right now than I did the last time we spoke. I mean, the last time we spoke, we did 2 podcasts that week because we were so excited. We did one when you were driving home from the airport after the Northern Illinois game, and then we did our regular one leading into the UConn game. Let's touch on what went wrong at UConn and then just move forward into where we're headed, because I think I want to say the same thing about UB Toledo that I do about Bills Jets. Everything's fine and great even if you go win this game. If you don't, we got to talk. It doesn't ruin anything, but concerns start to mount if things don't go my team's way for both of them this coming weekend. So first off, how are you processing, several days removed now, the 47-3 loss at UConn? And do you feel the same way that things can get right back on track if you can take out a very tough Toledo team this weekend in Amherst?
Yeah. I think they can get back on track for sure. First of all, this is a very rare, it has been years since the Bulls have had like a regular full week bye week. If you look back at the past, usually the Bulls get bye weeks, and most of the MAC really get bye weeks in quotes.
Yeah, built around the midweek action.
Right. It's all built around going into November, midweek action. So it's like, yeah, you have the week off, but it's really only 2 days because then you play Tuesday.
Right. And then the following week you play Wednesday, and then you play Tuesday again. And yeah, it starts messing with you.
So it's nice to get that break almost at the midway point here and be able to kind of self-scout, reflect, do some recruiting. I know that from what I've seen, the Bulls are putting together a pretty nice class out there. So they were able to continue to go out there and meet with some of those recruits, guys that they've got committed, guys that they're still trying to recruit in. And, everybody could take a breath. What do I think about the 47-3 game? I don't at all. Honestly, that's kind of what I've learned over the last week. I haven't thought about it at all because it didn't matter and it doesn't matter. You want to win it? Yes. Would it have been better if the Bulls won 47-3? Yes. But they didn't. And I think you said it on the postgame. The only thing that means is that the Bulls are not going to win the national championship this year.
Right.
And that sucks. But okay.
Yeah, I wasn't really counting on that.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, that's not what I'm. That's not. That's always the goal to start. But it's also not something that I was really hung up on. I want to win the MAC. I want to, I want to put the ring in everybody's face because
it's time.
The Bulls have been in the league long enough now where, like, starting to hate some of these places. And it's starting to be like, all right, this is a real thing. We're not the new guys anymore. We've been here for a quarter century and we've been playing everybody a long time. And now there's, when you're doing pregame and you're running down what our record is and what the history of the series. Yeah. The series has been, those are real numbers now. It's not like 2 and 3.
Right.
Those are real numbers now. And I want to win the MAC because to hell with Northern and Ohio.
And Toledo and Miami.
And Toledo and Miami. Yeah. Because I want to be better than them. And we talk about it all the time. That's really always the goal of every MAC team. Every MAC team is conference play. The Bulls are already one up. They've already got a win on the road against one of the favorites to win the conference. They can play at that level, certainly defensively. And the UConn game was a noon kick, which they had not had this year. I know that there was a lot of emphasis placed on, the Bulls had gone like 4 years without winning a night game. So the Bulls had done a lot of practicing at night and kind of really geared themselves toward that. And guess what? It was successful.
Great.
It worked. But then, it's almost impossible for any team to have a massive, massive emotional, physical win and come back the next week. And we thought that last week, and over this last week, I thought about it, and guess what? I got to sit on my couch and watch Alabama beat Georgia, and then last weekend, go to Vanderbilt. And that's the same thing that happened to UB.
Sure is.
Which is the same thing that happened similarly to Northern.
Yep.
Which is the same thing that happened to Toledo.
Yeah.
They beat Mississippi State by 1,000, and then they go and they have a weather delay in the middle of the game, and they lose a game that they should have won to Western Kentucky. It's just what happens. It's 18 to 23-year-olds, and it's a tough schedule, and it's tough to emotionally and physically get themselves back up to match the intensity. And UConn is a team that is a lot better than a lot of people thought coming into the year. And then you put on top of that, hey, we got their attention. We got their attention with a big win and being kind of a sweetheart for the week. Of everybody saying, hey, how about Buffalo? That's, Lumbo's first season. He's got a little something going on there. That's a great win. Hey, look at them. They're everybody's eyes open, and we became not just another team, but somebody that would become good to beat.
Yeah.
And I think UConn was ready for that.
Just like Northern Illinois was somebody for UB to beat. You knew it was a big game, but it became a bigger game with that extra week. And there's something I always say, I haven't said it in a while. I used to use it a lot applying to like hockey playoffs. A team's down 3-1 and you got to step on their throat and you got to win tonight. No, you don't. No, you don't. You've still got 3 more chances to win the thing. And here's the phrase that always came up with me. You cannot fake desperation. And the desperation that exists for a team trying to beat a division opponent that's ranked was a couple weeks ago, and they know that the next game is against a division opponent that is going to be in the running for the conference title. And then in between is a game at UConn. And you tell yourself all you want to that this one's just as big, but it's not. And this one's just as important, but it's not. And we need this game, but you don't. And when the other team is feeling it and you're not feeling it, and here's how I think that game got away from them. And I don't think there are really too many holes you can punch in the argument. The Bulls have started slowly on offense most games this year, and the defense has been exceptional and kept them in a place where they knew they were just a possession away from taking the lead or a possession away from getting back in the game. And this time around against UConn, the defense didn't quite come up as big, and they're allowed a break, man. They've been fantastic so far this year. They're allowed a little bit of a slip up. You can't rely on one side of the ball to win every football game for you. But when they weren't up to a superhero level task of keeping a Bulls offense that was a pop gun offense to start the game, to keep it in the hunt through halftime or deep into the second quarter when the Bulls offense finally woke up, as they've done several times so far this year, when that wasn't there, you look up at the score and you're getting buried. And let's be honest, as much as there are some things we like about this Bulls offense, they are not built to come from 3 scores down and run you out of the building. That's just not the way they're going to be able to do things. They've made some big plays. They've gotten some good production out of the ground game, but they're not a team that can come out there and just start firing the ball around the field and jump back into a game once they're down 21-3 or 21-0 or 24-6 or whatever the case may be. So all of those things combined with that noon start that you're talking about, I felt sluggish. We had an 11 a.m. pregame show. That's the earliest we've been on the air this year. It didn't feel right. We're eating breakfast sandwiches when we get to the stadium. That didn't feel right. They were delicious. Right. I was happy to have them, but it didn't feel right. We didn't have that same groove. It was a little bit off. It was, when you play a night game after playing several noon type of games, it feels a little bit off. Sure, you've got time during the day to get pumped for it, but man, you wake up and you're playing and there's just, and suddenly you're down quickly. And there's just, they're not built to come back from that. So I'm willing to throw that one away too. I also love that despite the fact that we tend to see UConn quite often and they feel kind of connected to the Bulls in the same way that UMass has felt connected to the Bulls because they play them so often. UMass is actually coming back to the division. UConn's not. Or come back to the conference, I should say. UConn is not. UConn, that was a throwaway. That was just an out-of-conference game in between two giant conference games, and I can write that thing off. And to get back to what you said about what the Bulls have been able to do over the course of this bye week, I had the chance to speak with Pete Lembo. I did a podcast with Paul Peck and Pete out at Wingnuts last week, and that was one of the things that stood out to me is his talk about self-scouting and how you really don't have that opportunity without a bye week. Like, you try, but you don't have the time to sit and sort of view yourself the way opponents are viewing you. And that's one of the main things I took away from the conversation with Pete. It's an opportunity for the Bulls to look at what they're presenting on film as if it's a different team and start to see things their opponent's way. And you can't spend all of your time doing that, but you can spend very little of your time doing that when you've got 6 days between games or 5 or 4 or whatever the case may be in most cases. So I think this was a very good time for the Bulls to reflect upon a loss. If they went out there and won 47-3, how great is that self-scouting going to do you? But you got a lot to look at. Obviously, there have been problems and things you need to fix over the course of what has already been a pretty good season for the Bulls. But they've got a lot on film to look at and see what was exploited by UConn and see it in the same way that Toledo might see it, which helps you prepare. I thought that was a very cool and interesting point about how a team can use a bye week.
Yeah. You just get a chance to put together a game plan against yourself on both sides of the ball. And I think that's invaluable to be able to sit there and spend a couple of days and really look at, whether it's formations or tendencies that you might have that you didn't really think about or, what have you. It allows you a chance to really take a breather, and it's well positioned here in the middle of the season. And just to add to those lists of teams, I mean, UConn was jacked up to play the Bulls. And last weekend they played Temple, and Temple is one of the worst teams in the country. And they had to survive with a goal line stand with 5 seconds to go to win the game. Like, Temple stinks. They should have blown them out of the water. But it's hard to get back up the next week. It's just hard to match the intensity. And they were lucky enough to get a fumble on with 5 seconds to go at the goal line and keep the win in a game that they really didn't play all that well in. So, but yeah, the self-scouting is very important. And, I just kind of seeing where the coaching has been, I feel pretty confident that they're going to be able to do a good job with that and come out and have some different looks and some different options, that maybe if it was a normal week, they wouldn't be able to have. And also it's an extra week that Toledo doesn't have to get ready for you, which is also a plus. But, just leading into this game from what you said about overall so far this season, the offense has taken a little bit of a while to get themselves on the tracks. And that is unfortunately leading into Toledo's strength, which is first quarter scoring. They jump on teams. Mississippi State, watching that game, it's not like Mississippi State is really that bad. It's that Mississippi State punted 3 times, and all of a sudden it was like 17-0, and they're like, "Oh no!" Like, now all of a sudden you're just trying to stay afloat, and they're Mississippi State, instead of kicking a field goal, is having to go for it at the end of the half, like, because they're down. Like, Temple just jumped them in the alley and got them. So I think ideally, if the Bulls are going to come out here and get this win, they're going to have to get things going on offense a little bit earlier. And, sometimes it's not necessarily scoring every possession. I know that the offense right now is kind of a work in progress. They don't have McMillan. They've, had some issues and have been trying to piece it together on that offensive line. They've had a couple of issues, on the left side or on the right side. And quarterback play, CJ has shown flashes and he's done some nice things, but really has been kind of up and down. The run game has been okay. It's been okay. But if they can at least put together some first downs, they can switch the field position and then get your defense back out on the field after they have a chance to catch their breath. I mean, that UConn game, the defense would run off the field. They'd sit down. The coach would kneel in front of them and be like, all right, on that last play, all right, we're punting. Let's go.
Yeah.
It felt, if there wasn't a commercial break, it felt like they barely could sit down before they were back out onto the field again. So, some of the offensive possessions, if you can get 2 first downs and give your defense a little bit of a chance to breathe and take some time off the clock and then switch that field position, you can do a lot. Your defense, I think, is good enough to play into that type of ball. And in the wins, they have done that. But in their 2 losses, the Missouri game and then the UConn game, there was a lot of 3 and outs. And even in that UConn game, giving up 47 points, if you remember in the first half, there were a number of times where the defense stood up and forced field goals and gave the opportunity for that game to be interesting. Because it could have been way more than that in the first half.
Yeah, 3 field goals.
A lot of field goals.
3, yeah.
Yeah, and they kept them with a heartbeat, at least for a little while.
Yeah,
the offense just couldn't do anything.
If it was just the 3 field goals, that'd be cool. But it was the 3 field goals and the 2 touchdowns where you kind of wind up in a tough spot when the offense isn't going. But again, a lot of that just comes back to, can the offense do anything to just give the defense some breathing room and maybe put them in a situation where, hey, all right, we move the ball and now we pin them at their, let's say, 8-yard line. If we can get a 3 and out here, we're getting the ball around midfield. Now that's an easier job to accomplish. And it's the complementary football thing that is so popular to talk about, but you can really see it play out when a team like UB takes the field because the defense is so good and because the offense has had the types of struggles that it has. It needs to just do enough to help the defense to give it the chance to do enough to help the offense to give them the chance to go score. And it really is like, chess game, whatever you want to say, but field position matters, time of possession matters, and that's the way that the Bulls are playing right now. It's the way they have to play right now. You're relying on the defense to come up with big plays. But if the offense could at least put them in a position where big play means force a 3 and out in their own end, as opposed to stop them on 1st and goal from their own 8 or from your own 8 or whatever it is. You need the defense is going to drive this team. Wherever this team goes, it's going to be based on what the defense is able to do. But if the offense can help the defense help the offense, they're going to be in a much better spot. And they've done that most of this season. I even think they did that, although the score was lopsided, in the Mizzou game. I think there was a lot more of that. This one just kind of fell apart early, and they could never really get on track, and you walk away with a super lopsided score in a game that I think was a pretty decent matchup for the Bulls. I don't think you play UConn again 2 weeks from now. I don't think that same thing happens. But it did, but it goes away, and your record right now is 1-0. Your record that matters right now is 1-0. The other thing we're tracking, of course, is bowl eligibility, and you're sitting in a pretty good spot for that as well, considering the opponents coming up on your schedule. This Bulls team, I would be shocked at this point if it doesn't get to the 6 wins necessary. The earlier, the better, as we've talked about, but those are your goals. Get to Detroit, get to a bowl game. All of that is still sitting there. And, this is a recording. This is what we talk about all year, every year. But here they are at 1-0 in conference. And that matters a whole lot more than a 47-3 loss out of conference a week and a half ago in a game that can just be put to bed with a win against Toledo. So You mentioned Toledo. They're come out and score quickly type of team, early offense. What else do you have in mind as we're sitting there gauging how this thing is going to turn out? As we're watching the first half of this game, what are we looking for to see if this is going to work for the Bulls?
Well, Gleason, their quarterback, has had a bit of a roller coaster season where, man, their opener against the FCS, he looked great. Mississippi State, he looked great. And he looked good last week against Miami. He did not look good against UMass. And he did not look good against Western Kentucky. So, if we're going by the schedule here, hopefully this will be an off week for him.
That sounds good.
Yeah, he's a mobile guy. He can run. He's nowhere near as fast and dangerous running as DeQuan Finn was, who, by the way, left Toledo, who believed in him to go to Baylor. I hope those checks are cashing because he is no longer the starter down there. So he's just sitting in Waco, not playing football, which is a terrible thing to have happen to a human being.
I don't like it
Waco, because Waco sucks.
Yeah, not a fan.
But, Gleason has stepped in and he's played really well. He can move. He can run. They'll run quarterback power with him. He's a little bit slight, but, he can still run with some power behind the pads and get down there. If he misses a throw, it's usually high, which, could be a situation that the Bulls, if a safety is lurking behind, maybe they're able to kind of get a freebie on an overthrow. But there isn't a one thing that you can take away. And that's, Newton is their star wide receiver. They move him around a bunch, but, he's a stud. And they've got some running backs. Stewart's a nice running back that they have. They can run and throw. They can do both, which is going to definitely stress any defense, but specifically any defense in the MAC. And if there's one thing I'm interested in seeing, I'm interested to see how much the Bulls blitz in the first half, and specifically if they get a little bit creative with the DBs, because this is an offensive line that lost every starter from last year in Toledo. They have 5 new guys on that offensive line. Now, they brought in transfers. It's not like they have all freshmen up there, but it's an all-new line that's playing together here this year with a new running back and quarterback. And, it's looked like that through 5 games where there's times where they look like they're gelling and they're unstoppable. And then there's, they play UMass. It's a 1-point game in the fourth quarter. And you're like, what's going on? What's going on here? And they needed their defense in that game to really kind of help bail them out with a key interception when UMass was driving to make things interesting there in the fourth. But the Western Kentucky game, coming out of the weather delay, Toledo was comfortably in front. And I thought it was interesting that, the Hilltopper coaches in that weather delay must have said, screw it. We're sending 6 every play. And they sent 6 or 7, like almost every play in the third and fourth quarter. And it got ugly back there. Gleason was running for his life. And Miami didn't do a lot of that, which I was surprised in. They rushed almost exclusively only 4. But when they did bring pressure, I thought that they got things a little bit more unsettled and forced Gleason off the spot and made things a little bit more interesting. So it hasn't really been the case this year. We haven't seen the Bulls blitz a whole bunch. They've done a pretty good job with those strong D tackles. And then, guys coming off of the edge. They've done a good job with forcing the quarterbacks to feel uncomfortable just from that. But I'm interested to see if the Bulls maybe get a little bit more aggressive early on and try to force the issue. You're going to leave yourself exposed. By doing that, you're taking a chance with some excellent wide receivers. This is a good wide receiver core, probably overall the best in the MAC. But the DBs for the Bulls have played pretty well this year. It might be a situation where you're saying, okay, if they start bombing us early and burning us on it, then we'll stop. But until that time, we're going to see if we can get to them. And it's something that has been effective. Mississippi State didn't really do that. They thought we're the SEC team and we're going to rush 4 and get home. And they didn't. They didn't a lot. And Gleason was very comfortable and just ripped them apart. And I want to see if the Bulls do that. I think they can I think the Bulls can give them problems in the run game, stopping their run game. But, their play action and their wide receiving threats are for real. So it's a delicate balance for the Bulls defense this week.
If you're Jason Candle and his staff, is there anything you saw in the UConn game that suddenly jumps out as exploitable, whether it's on the offensive or defensive side of the ball? Because as much as I want to put it behind me, that's the last thing that they have to look at on tape, and they had a full week to take an eye or to have an eye on that, or even longer, because the game was played longer ago and somebody's probably advanced scouting. So, is there anything you saw out of the Bulls in that loss that we want to throw away that might come back and be revisited on Saturday?
Well, the Bulls' defensive tackle depth is significant. They've got a lot of guys, and they all are good. They missed Wallow.
Yeah.
Not having him there was noticeable. And some of those zone runs really, really gashed the Bulls. And I think that they did in the first half, in that first quarter, a little bit more than the first quarter. They did a good job formationally of trying to get Dolak out of the middle of the defensive formation. So whether it be trying to get him positionally so that he's over the tight end, or he's got to go towards the outside, towards the defensive ends, so that he's not right in the middle of the field. Our defense adjusted after that first period, but if you remember that first quarter, it was like, whoa, what is going on? They were running pretty much whatever they wanted to do out there. So I think that might be something to take a look at, combined with, all right, well, Wallow is an excellent player and he's not there. And the Bulls' rush defense wasn't exactly the same with him not there. They were okay, but it wasn't the same. And it's going to be interesting to see if they can, if they're going to try and do some of those similar things. We can't really gauge how the Bulls for a full game would have handled Nick Evers last in UConn with like a true, fully mobile, dual threat quarterback. They were doing okay. And I guess you can say they did all right because they knocked him out. Like they knocked him unconscious.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess they were doing okay.
He wasn't having fun.
But no, but it's one of those things where, play after play after play where you can get into the second half and it only takes one play to break your heart on a player like that. And they didn't really have to deal with that after the first quarter and a half. So Gleason can run, like I said. I don't think he's as good a runner as Evers was, but he can still run, and they still call designed runs for him and design plays for him. So we'll see if the math changes a little bit with it being when the quarterback runs or has the threat to run, it changes from 10 on offense versus 11 on defense to 11 on 11. And that can really be a big shift. And we'll see how the Bulls, if they have to do any type of adjustment to that.
I think the Bulls are going to do that offensively at some point, start to utilize Agbana's legs more. I mean, coming into this season, we knew he could run and weren't sure if he could pass. Now we see he can pass a little, but the running really hasn't been much of the offense, the running from the quarterback position. And I think that's one of the big advantages of having a guy like Agbana is his mobility and his ability to tuck it and get out of there. And if guys aren't open, if you're not seeing the look you like, to take what you can get. And, I guess I'm asking two separate questions. One is about called run plays for the quarterback, but also CJ deciding to tuck it and take off. We have not seen much of it, and it seems like that could be a huge weapon for the Bulls offense and really could change the way that they look big picture.
It's the second one. It's your second option there. And I think that they have tried to get him going a little bit on the ground in the last 2 games. It hasn't really been all that successful, but I feel like there certainly has been, as the season's gone on, an uptick of them trying to get him running the ball in a designed way. I'm interested in the unsettled play, CJ. I'm interested in read 1 isn't there, read 2 isn't there. This is an excellent defensive front in Toledo. I gotta go, and I'm just going to let my athleticism take over, and I'm going to try and make a play because I think he's got the athleticism to do that, to make those plays. And we haven't really seen him do that. I give him a lot of credit. He's been very patient and willing to sit in the pocket and try to deliver the throw rather than just, try to run all over the place. But I think that there are times this year where he's stuck it out a little bit too long, where he could have just pulled it down and tried to make something happen. I mean, if you're going to get sacked just standing back there, I'd rather have him try to get away sometimes. Now, some of these sacks this year he's had, especially last week against UConn, I can think of 2 where he just had no opportunity to do anything.
All right, it's
he's
immediate.
Taking the snap.
Yeah.
He's setting up. There's a guy in his face. The play is over.
Yep.
But, I want to see him pull it down and be creative because I think he can be creative and make some of those unsettled plays where especially if you can catch a defense in man-to-man.
Yeah, backs turned.
The backs are turned, and you can really rip off a nice run. He's got legs, man. He's got some speed if he can get out there. Those are the more of the plays that I'm kind of aching to see out of him.
Yeah, but like you, I'm proud of him for not relying on that constantly, for not going into week 1 saying, I can always take off. Like, I want you training yourself to be a quarterback first and a running back second, but I also want you to be able to, at any moment, change your plans and get out there and make something happen. And, I think it's going to come. We just haven't seen it nearly as much as I would have expected, which, again, I kind of think is good. But that's still sitting there. That's a part of the Bulls offense sort of waiting to be unleashed. And you do that, you can change a lot about the way that they're trying to defend you and simplify things, not just for, that play in particular, but for things to come. If they're worried about that, maybe that changes the way that they defend you, and maybe you've got better opportunities down the field, and maybe your running backs have better opportunities underneath if they're concerned with CJ running. And as of right now, that hasn't been a real focus of the Bulls offense. A little bit of that could change a lot about the way they're perceived and defended.
Right. If he does start showing himself to be a weapon, teams are going to have to start spying him, and that's going to take a guy out of coverage. And that's going to, possibly open up some areas of the field that the Bulls could try and exploit. So, it's a weapon in his arsenal. I just want to see him take it out and use it a little bit if he has the opportunity. But again, I appreciate him sticking in there, being a pocket passer when he has the opportunity to, and letting it rip, going out there and trying to make some plays. And he has made some nice plays in the passing game this year, but he's also had some games like last game against UConn where he just did not look good, did not look settled from the get-go, and there wasn't really any mechanism that was getting him going.
Did you see this thing they put out earlier today about video screens coming in for the Toledo game?
I did. Yes.
What's going on there?
I have heard that the Bulls are hot on the trail of a new scoreboard, which is desperately needed.
We've been hearing they wanted one for a long time. You never know when it's going to come through, but it seems like from this notice that we received today, it seems like they're well on their way.
Yeah, they're going to bring out some new video boards. So anybody that's listening, get out to the stadium, check it out. They're going to have some in-game hosts. I don't know who those are. Maybe it's Paul and I in the booth.
I hope so.
We'll just...
I think you guys need a little bit more to do during the game.
Right. Hey, listen, we'll do it if we have to. It would be wonderful. we'll do the dance cam or something.
What about James Patterson? He could do it.
He could do it. He's
around.
on the pregame show. He's great.
That's right.
Got a great personality.
Yep.
So yeah, they're bringing in some new stuff. They're testing it out, bringing in some new video boards, and it's a massive game. And it's supposed to, I mean, partly cloudy, 65 in October.
Take it.
It's about as good as you're going to get, you know? So come on out and enjoy the game. And it's, you know, we've talked a lot about, all right, we're over the last one. It's a big game, man. This is a really big game. This is another one of the monsters in the conference. If the Bulls can start their season with wins over Northern, and against Toledo,
I feel pretty good about Kent and Akron at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So this is going to be a really good game. I think the Bulls are going to be rested and be able and come out there fully ready to kind of get back on the horse and prove things to people. And it's going to be a very, very good game that both teams need. I mean, we're out of the fun time. There's no more FCSs on the schedule. There's no more, trips to Ohio State for Western Michigan.
Right. And there's also no more divisions. And we talk about it every week, but there's no more divisions. So a game against Toledo is just as big as a game against Miami or Ohio or Bowling Green has been over the years. This is who you're competing against, not in the MAC championship game necessarily, but just to get to the MAC championship game. So it's a bigger game against Toledo than most games against Toledo typically are, even though they're big because they're MAC. But now that the divisions are gone, it's a whole different animal.
Yeah, and guess what? This game is big for them now too.
Right.
Like it's becoming big. I mean, you can really stick it to one of the favorites here. Toledo is supposed to be at the top. You know, they've got a big payroll of coaches, and they've got, a school
contract extension for Candle this week.
Yeah. I mean, you could get a ham sandwich into Toledo to go to school there. You can get them through the admissions process, no problem. So they've got a lot of advantages there in Toledo that some of the other schools in the MAC, certainly UB, does not have. And you can stick it to them. You can put yourself and plant your flag as if the Bulls have those 2 wins, they're the number 1 team in the conference, period, end of discussion. They become the number 1 team in the conference with those 2 wins. So they can certainly make a big play this weekend. Traditionally, the Bulls have actually played Toledo fairly tough in UB Stadium. Remember last time they were down big, and then they forced Finn into 3 fourth-quarter interceptions and then flipped the game on its head with a couple of pick sixes there and came from behind and won. So,
well, this will be the 5th time. This is the 5th time Toledo's playing at UB Stadium since the Bulls joined the MAC in '99, and the Bulls are 3-1 in those games. UB is 3-1 in the last 4 meetings with Toledo overall. So as much as I view these games as intimidating and scary, and they kind of loom over me, it's like a dark cloud facing Toledo. The Bulls have had success against this team and against a coach who's been around for a while and really has been praised quite a bit throughout the college football community. It's a good program. It's a good coach, and the Bulls have done relatively well against them.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a rivalry, but it's certainly the Bulls have been able to enough times been a thorn in their side and kind of thrown a monkey wrench into their seasons enough times that, it's significant. It's noticeable. It's noticeable. I mean, just thinking today, I was thinking about some of the past games. Remember the midweek game where Jarrett Patterson ran over 3 guys on a screen pass?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that was cool.
I mean, there's a lot of those cool plays, or even at Toledo where the Bulls just didn't show up in the first half, and then Tyree came out and was on a heater in the second half and blew them out. So there's some big time games between these 2 teams.
I'd like Tyree to play this weekend. Is he around?
He's injured.
I know.
He's injured. So he's on the mend again.
Stinks. All right, man. I'll see you at the stadium. Go Bulls.
Go Bulls.
I don't know about you guys, but I just want to get the hell out of here.